I held my own hand. That's how it began. The waiting room was cold, and the nurse smiled like she didn't notice I was trembling. I looked around and saw husbands holding wives, sisters brushing hair off foreheads, friends whispering promises. And me? I sat alone. Not because I didn't have family, but because they said they had a flight to catch. They hugged me like they were already halfway gone. Her perfume stayed longer than her touch. His eyes kept flicking to the clock. They said it was work. Urgent. They'd call as soon as they landed. And I believed them. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You believe, even when it stings. But the phone didn't ring. Not that day, not the next, not once. And so I sat there listening to the beeping machines, the murmured prayers, the sound of my own heartbeat trying to stay steady, and I held my own hand. Thank you for sitting with me today. For giving me your time when someone else might have ignored your voice too. I don't take that lightly. If you're listening right now, I'd like to know where you're watching from. Maybe you've been through something you never told anyone. Maybe you're still holding it in your chest like a stone you've never had the words to name. If that's true, you can tell me. Or you don't have to say much at all. You can just write, I held my own hand. That's enough, because sometimes we carry our strength so quietly, even we forget how loud it really is. And maybe, just maybe, hearing one truth out loud helps someone else speak theirs too. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Or so I thought. After his father passed, I poured everything I had into raising him. I worked jobs that left my hands sore and my back stiff just to keep the lights on. I learned how to fix leaking pipes and stretch meals from scraps. I missed birthdays to pay rent and went without new shoes so he could have what he needed. But I never once complained because I thought love was enough. I thought all those nights reading to him by flashlight, all those mornings packing his lunch with little notes, all those sacrifices, big and small, would add up to something he'd never forget. And for a while, he didn't. He used to say I was the strongest woman he knew. He used to hug me like I was his whole world. But time has a way of rewriting stories we thought were carved in stone. When he met her, I was happy for him. I smiled and baked a pie and asked her questions about her job, her dreams, her favorite music. She answered politely. Always politely. Her hair was always in place, her smile never too wide. She said the right things, but never once looked me in the eye like she meant them. She called me Mom, but only because it was easier than silence. There was a distance there from the beginning, like she had already measured the space she planned to keep between us. I tried to close it. I tried to be kind. I even blamed myself when she turned cold. Told myself maybe I was old-fashioned, maybe too much, maybe not enough. I swallowed my pride like medicine, hoping it would make us closer. But it never did. Looking back, I think the cracks started long before the silence. They were in the way she moved my things when she visited, the way he stopped calling just to talk, the way my birthday turned into a reminder text and a digital card. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I didn't want to be that kind of mother. But when someone starts showing you less, it takes a while before you realize it's not by accident, it's a decision. And that silence that followed? It wasn't sudden. It was just the echo of everything they'd already stopped saying. I remember the exact feel of that night, like the room had been holding its breath all day, and finally let it out the second the sun dipped behind the trees. I was sitting on the couch in my old sweater, the one with the thinning elbows, wrapped around me like a second skin. My IV port was still sore from earlier, and every movement reminded me of what was happening inside me, quietly and steadily. The house was dim, the way I liked it. No harsh lights, just the lamp near the bookshelf casting soft shadows across the rug. I had made tea, though I hadn't touched it. The steam had long faded. I was waiting. Not for anything big. Just a moment. A moment where he might reach over and squeeze my hand or ask how I was really doing. Something real. Instead, he cleared his throat and sat across from me, like someone preparing for a speech. She stood behind him, arms crossed, smile already in place. He said they had to leave for a few days. Something came up. Work-related. A last-minute trip. He said it like he was asking for permission. Soft voice, careful tone, but I noticed the bags near the door. Packed. Zipped. Ready. He'd already decided. They'd already booked the flight. I looked at her. She didn't say much, just nodded like it was all very unfortunate but necessary. I nodded too. That's what I've learned to do when things hurt more than they should. I nod. I asked when they'd be back. He said soon. I asked if they'd call. He said of course. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that even if they left, they'd still check in, still think of me when the room got quiet or the night felt heavy. But hope makes fools of mothers sometimes. We cling to the version of our children we remember instead of the one standing in front of us. And in that moment, I was still holding on to the little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest, not the man who now avoided my eyes. They hugged me, lightly, like it was habit, not comfort. I walked them to the door, though my legs ached and my chest felt hollow. I stood on the front step as they walked to the car. He waved once. She was already checking her phone. I didn't say a word. I just watched them pull away, watched the taillights blink down the road, watched the silence stretch out across the driveway like something final. And when the sound of the engine faded completely, I realized I was standing there for no one. They were gone. And I was exactly where they thought it was okay to leave me. The next morning came too soon, the kind of morning that feels heavy before you even leave the bed. My bones ached, not from age, but from the medicine working its way through me, tugging and pulling at every inch of strength I had left. It was chemo day. I got dressed slow, steady, one layer at a time like armor. My coat barely fit right over the bandage taped near my collarbone. I didn't bother with breakfast. My stomach had stopped asking for kindness weeks ago. I stepped out into the cold air and sat behind the wheel of my old car, gripping it with hands that didn't stop trembling even when I told them to. There's something cruel about driving yourself to a place that strips you down just so you can keep going. No one should have to do that alone. No one should have to drive themselves home after poisoning their own body just to stay alive. The clinic was quiet when I walked in. It always is. You can hear the soft taps of shoes, the rustling of papers, the gentle hum of machines. The nurse greeted me with the same polite smile she always wore, the kind that says she cares but has seen too much to ask. She didn't mention I was alone. She never does. They know better than to name the emptiness sitting in the chair beside you. I sat down in the cold leather recliner, and they began the drip. The needle pinched, but that was the easiest part. It's the stillness that hurts most. The waiting. The weight of your own body trying to pretend it's fine. I watched the clear fluid slide down the tube like a slow promise. Kill what's inside to save what's left. That's the deal. I looked around at the others. Some had company. Hands being held, heads leaning on shoulders, quiet conversations about dinner or television shows. I didn't envy them. I just noticed them. The way you notice a painting you'll never afford. I closed my eyes and tried to pretend I was somewhere else. But the medicine has a way of dragging you back to the truth. When it was over, I stood up too fast, and the room shifted. I waited until it stilled, then made my way back to the car. The parking lot felt colder than when I arrived. I gripped the steering wheel again, harder this time. My fingers hurt from the cold, but I didn't loosen them. I had to get home. The drive back was quiet, but not peaceful. The roads were bumpy, the sky was gray. I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't want sound. I just wanted to make it back in one piece. Somewhere near the corner by the gas station, I made a too tight turn and bumped the side mirror. It had already been cracked from before. This time it splintered a little more. I stared at it for a second, that broken reflection staring back at me. I should have cried, but I didn't. I just blinked slowly, pulled back into the lane, and kept going. Because that's what I've always done. I make it. Barely. But I always do. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. Still, silent, like it didn't even know I had left. I sat there for a moment before I turned off the engine, listening to the tick of the cooling metal under the hood. The silence was thick. Not empty, just present. Like it had been waiting to greet me. I opened the door and walked back into the house. And the loneliness? It didn't hide. It met me at the door, followed me to the kitchen, and sat across from me as I warmed up soup I didn't want to eat. It didn't speak, but I heard it anyway. It didn't touch me, but I felt it in every room. It wasn't just loneliness anymore. It had a shape, a weight, a name I couldn't forget. And it wasn't going anywhere. That night, the house was too quiet to ignore. I had turned off the television hours earlier, not because I was tired of it, but because even its noise felt empty. I had already folded the same blanket 3 times, made a cup of tea I didn't finish, checked the locks on the door like it mattered more than anything else in the world. I sat in my chair with the lamp on low, the clock ticking in slow motion beside me, and reached for my old phone. The screen had cracks, and the battery didn't last long, but it was something to hold. Something to remind me I still existed in a world that moved too fast without me. I opened that little blue app with the white F. Scrolled slowly, not really looking for anything. Just passing time with photos of other people's joy. And then, there they were. My son and his wife. Bright as daylight on a beach that didn't look anywhere near a conference center. He was in a pale blue swimsuit. She had one of those oversized hats and a drink with a slice of pineapple tucked neatly on the rim. Their arms were around each other, and their skin had the kind of golden glow that only comes from days spent under a forgiving sun. I stared at it longer than I meant to. My thumb hovered over the screen before I dared to zoom in. I thought maybe I was mistaken, that maybe it was an old photo or something shared from a memory. But the date stared back at me like a smirk. It was from that morning. While I had been struggling to open a jar of soup and wondering if I had the strength to make it to the mailbox, they were lounging on a beach chair, laughing into the breeze. I kept scrolling through their page. Photo after photo, sunset dinners, fancy hotel robes. His arm around her waist, her hand holding a flute of something sparkling. Matching sunglasses, matching grins. Not a meeting room. Not a seminar. A resort. I stared at one image longer than the rest. They were sitting by a pool with white towels draped behind them, a waiter in the background pouring champagne into their glasses. They were toasting. I don't know what to. I only know what they weren't toasting to. They weren't toasting to survival. They weren't toasting to me. They weren't raising a glass to the woman they left behind, with a hollow promise and a sore arm from treatment. They were glowing. I was fading. They looked like they had won something. And maybe they thought they had. Maybe they believed they'd escaped something heavy by calling it business. Maybe they told themselves I'd understand, that I'd never know. But the truth doesn't need permission to show up. It just does. And in that moment, with the phone screen lighting my face in that dark room, I realized this wasn't just a matter of being forgotten. It was something else entirely. It was a decision. A willful, deliberate choice to place themselves in comfort while I sat in silence. They had left me behind, and then lied about where they went. They didn't just forget to call. They chose not to. And they didn't go away because of work. They went away because they could. And because they assumed I'd stay put, quietly waiting in the shadows of their convenience. I turned off the phone and placed it on the table, screen down. Not because I was done, but because I had seen enough. The silence in the room wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't just loneliness now. It was the sound of truth settling in. And that truth had weight, not loud or messy, just firm and still. I sat there in that chair for a long time, not angry, not crying, just aware. Aware that something had shifted deep inside me, something permanent. Something final. And I didn't need to speak it out loud to know that the next time they came back through that door, they wouldn't be coming back to the same woman they had left. Sometime around the 3rd night after seeing those photos, when the pain in my bones had started to settle into something quieter but heavier, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen in my hand and an old notepad in front of me. I wasn't writing anything in particular, just circling thoughts the way people stir soup that doesn't need stirring. That's when it came back to me. Not a new thought, but an old one I'd tucked away a long time ago. Years back, when their little girl was born, I had done something most people don't think grandmothers do. I set up a trust, not because they asked me to, not because anyone expected me to, but because I wanted her to have something untouched by the world. A quiet gift, buried deep in paper and time, waiting for the day she'd need it more than anyone realized. I had done it in silence. Quiet appointments, simple papers. It wasn't much back then, just something small pulled together from what little I had. I never told them about it, not because I didn't trust them exactly, but because part of me knew. Even then, Knew that love can turn cold without warning. Knew that people forget the hands that held them first. Knew that one day, the version of themselves they show in family photos might not match who they become behind closed doors. So I kept it to myself, like a seed you plant in secret, unsure if it'll ever sprout, but needing it to be there just in case. As I sat there in that kitchen, the light flickering slightly overhead, the kettle cooling behind me, I reached into the drawer where I kept all the old things. Letters, receipts, a few pieces of paper I hoped I'd never need. And there it was, the file with the name of the law firm and the original trust paperwork still folded with care. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. My voice was calm, low, certain. I told them I wanted to make changes. Reassign the beneficiary. Adjust the release terms. Remove the middleman. They asked a few questions. I gave short answers. They didn't push. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because sometimes survival means more than getting through the day. It means protecting the future from the same hands that let you fall. I didn't want to erase my son. But I couldn't trust a man who toasted his wife by the ocean, while his mother sat with a bandaged chest and an empty kitchen. And if they could pretend I was gone, if they could stand under the sun and sip from tall glasses and let the days pass without a thought for me, then I could plan for a time when they truly wouldn't matter. When my love would outlive their loyalty. I made the changes, signed the forms, updated the records, and when it was done, I didn't feel regret. I didn't even feel relief. I felt something deeper. A kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done right by someone who still has time left to become something better. I folded the papers, put them back in the drawer, and stood at the sink, watching the wind move the trees outside. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there. Because something had closed quietly inside me that night. Not a door. Not a chapter. Something older. Something final. And I knew I would never open it again. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The room was still and the air had that early chill, the kind that makes you pull the blanket a little tighter even when you know you have to get up. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my feet rest on the cold floor for a moment before I moved. The weight in my chest wasn't pain. It was purpose. I already knew what I had to do. I walked to the kitchen and made myself tea, not because I wanted it, but because it was part of the rhythm. Some things you do not for comfort, but for steadiness. The kettle hissed, and I watched the steam rise like breath from something unseen, and then I reached for the phone again. The number was still in my call history, sitting there like a quiet yes waiting for its question. When the lawyer answered, his voice was polite and familiar, but I could hear the shift in his tone when I told him I was ready to proceed. I said I wanted the trust moved, from their name to hers, clean, immediate, no delays. There was a pause on the other end, not out of confusion, but surprise. He cleared his throat and asked me one question, just one. Was I certain? I said yes without hesitation, and then I added something else. I told him I didn't want a ceremony, no drawn-out explanations, no courtroom drama or signature traps. I wasn't asking for revenge, I was asking for peace, for dignity, for quiet freedom. I told him exactly how I wanted it done, and made sure nothing would circle back in their favor. He followed my words carefully, professionally, but I could tell he was still trying to understand how someone like me had reached this place with such clarity. But what people forget is that pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just decides. And I had decided. While we were on the line, I asked him to help me update something else, my will. I removed my son from it. Completely. No half inheritance, no sentimental set-asides, no second chances buried in a safety deposit box. I wrote in the names of people who had shown up without being asked, a neighbor who checked in, a nurse who waited with me after a long treatment. The small kindnesses that felt bigger than blood. There was no bitterness in my voice, no tremble in my hands, just instructions, just calm. When we hung up, I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, my tea now cold and untouched beside me. I didn't cry, not because I was trying to be strong, but because some goodbyes don't come with tears, just clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't demand to be justified. The kind that settles into your bones and lets you breathe, without flinching. I folded the final documents and slipped them into the folder where I kept my most important things. I looked around the room, same curtains, same clock ticking above the fridge, same quiet hum of the refrigerator, and nothing looked different. But I had done something they would never expect. I had removed their hands from the future, not with rage but with reason. And once I did, the silence around me didn't feel like abandonment anymore. It felt like space. Space to stand up in, space to breathe, space to begin again. It was a Thursday, late in the afternoon, and I remember it because the sun had finally broken through after days of dull skies. I was sitting in my chair by the window, half listening to the wind and the ticking clock when I heard footsteps on the porch. Not hurried or heavy, but soft, like someone unsure if they were welcome. I stood up slow, careful, the way I always do these days, and opened the door to find my neighbor standing there, smiling gently, and beside her was the one face I hadn't expected to see so soon. She stood there with her hands behind her back, eyes wide and unsure, hair a little messy like she'd been playing in something she wasn't supposed to. My granddaughter. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me like she was searching my face for something familiar. I stepped aside and nodded, and they both came in without a word. The neighbor said she had offered to drop her by for a short visit, said the little one had asked about me more than once, and it felt right. I nodded again and offered tea, though I didn't expect anyone to say yes. We ended up sitting outside, the three of us, the breeze just strong enough to lift the edges of the paper she clutched in her hands. She turned to me and said, quiet and sweet, that she made me something. I asked if I could see it, and she handed over a folded card made from bright yellow construction paper with crooked letters and a heart drawn too big in the center. Inside, it said she missed me. That was all. Just those 3 words. But I felt them land in a place no one else had touched in a long time. I looked at her then, really looked at her. She had his eyes, but not his distance. There was a softness there, something open and unafraid. She didn't ask me why I hadn't come around. She didn't try to explain where they'd been. She just sat beside me like it was the most natural thing in the world. At one point, she looked up and asked if I'd be okay. And I didn't give her the kind of answer adults like to offer children to protect them from the truth. I gave her something better. I said, "I'll be better than okay, sweet pea. I'll be free." She nodded like she understood more than anyone had ever given her credit for. Like she knew freedom wasn't just about leaving something behind. It was about choosing who you carry forward. We sat there for a long time, talking about small things. Her school, a painting she'd made, a bug she found in the garden that scared her half to death. And all the while, I could feel something shifting inside me. Not repairing exactly, but growing. This girl, this little one with paint on her sleeve and sunlight in her hair, was the reason I had made those calls. She was the root I had planted all those years ago when I started that trust, even if I didn't know it then. She was the part of my family that hadn't learned to forget yet. The part that still knew how to show up. The part that still reached out with clean hands and an open heart. When it was time for them to leave, she hugged me tight, tighter than I expected, and whispered thank you into my ear. I didn't ask for what. I just held her back and told her to be kind, always, and to come back soon. As I watched them walk down the path and turn the corner, something settled inside me. I wasn't alone. Not really. I had made room for something new. And for the first time in a long while, I looked at the space around me, not as something emptied out by loss, but as something waiting to be filled with something better. Something honest. Something real. It was almost a full week later when I heard the sound of tires crunching the gravel in front of the house. The kind of sound that used to mean something good, company, family, someone coming home. I stood by the window, not hiding, just watching. The car door opened, and there they were, stepping out like they'd just finished a photo shoot. He was wearing sunglasses too big for his face, laughing loudly about something I couldn't hear, and she had that same untouched look about her, the one that said nothing in her world had gone wrong. Their skin was bronzed, glowing. Not the kind of tan you get from walking around a city or sitting in a conference room. This was beach tan, saltwater tan, the kind that comes with no responsibilities and long, lazy days. The kind of tan you don't wear when someone you claim to care for is sitting alone with chemo dripping into their veins. Music spilled from the car. Some upbeat island rhythm. The trunk popped open, and I saw them unloading bags, matching ones, bright colors, tags from some luxury resort. They moved slowly, like they weren't in a hurry to explain a thing. Like the world had been waiting for them to return and pick up right where they left off. She walked ahead, her heels clicking against the stone path like punctuation. He followed behind, holding a shopping bag in one hand and a cup in the other. I watched him glance toward the mailbox and pause. I had changed it days ago, removed my full name and replaced it with just initials. A small change. Quiet, but not accidental. He stood there a second too long, then shook it off like it meant nothing and kept walking toward the front door. I had already left the door unlocked. Not out of welcome, but because I wanted this moment to happen exactly as it should. No fumbling, no delay. He pushed the door open and stepped in like everything was still his to enter. That same smile stretched across his face, practiced and smooth. He lifted the shopping bag with a flourish and said, "We brought you something from the Bahamas." I didn't ask what it was. I didn't even look at the bag. I just stood still in the hallway, holding a single envelope in my hand. She stood behind him, not saying a word, her eyes flicking from me to the walls like she was checking to see if anything had changed. It had, but not the kind of change you can hang or move or repaint. Without a word, I stepped forward and held out the envelope. He hesitated, then took it with a puzzled expression, as if I'd handed him a grocery list or a greeting card. I didn't explain, I didn't warn, I didn't soften the truth. I simply turned and walked back into the kitchen, where the kettle had just started to sing. I didn't turn back to see if he opened it right away. I didn't need to. I knew what was in it. Legal language, reassigned names, removed access, clear, final lines that couldn't be undone with an apology or a gift from a duty-free store. The paper would tell him that I had moved forward without asking his permission, that I had redrawn the map and left him off it. As I poured my tea, steady hands now where there had once been tremble, I could hear the silence behind me stretch. No footsteps, no questions, just the kind of stillness that settles over a person when the lie they've been living in finally breaks. I didn't feel triumph, I didn't feel rage, I felt still. The kind of still that comes when the storm has passed and what's left isn't wreckage, but clarity. They were back, but not to the same home, not to the same woman. And nothing they brought in those bright little bags could fix what they had chosen to leave behind. He stood there holding the envelope like it was something sweet. He still believed I was the same woman who baked pies and swallowed pain just to keep the peace. I watched him from the edge of the kitchen doorway, the steam from my tea curling quietly in the air between us. He peeled the flap open slow, probably expecting a thank you card or maybe some soft words wrapped in forgiveness. He wasn't ready for what was inside. Not the ink, not the meaning, not the weight. It wasn't a letter. It was a mirror. A clean, cold reflection of what he'd done and what I had finally decided not to allow anymore. The silence in that moment had a shape to it, like furniture in a room too small for what it was meant to hold. His eyes moved over the lines. Legal language, direct and unmoving. Asset removal, name deletions, final instructions that left no room for question. It was all there, neat and signed. The trust had been transferred, the will had been rewritten, and his name, once stitched into every corner of my future, was gone. Erased not in anger but in resolve. What he read was not punishment. It was consequence. He didn't speak at first. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like he had words but no permission from his own pride to use them. He looked up from the paper and for a moment, a single slow, stretched breath of time, he saw me. Not the role. Not the title. Not the woman he had grown comfortable dismissing. He saw me. Me, with tired eyes that had seen too much and hands that had given more than they received. Me, with a voice I had folded away for the sake of family dinners and holidays and keeping things nice. Me standing steady and unshaken by whatever guilt he had just now started to feel. And that look, oh, that look. It wasn't rage or fear or even disbelief. It was recognition, the kind that makes a person wonder when the ground beneath them started to shift and how they never noticed it was moving. His wife stood behind him, arms at her side now, no smile, no words, just still. She looked smaller than before, not physically, but in presence. The sparkle had drained from her voice. The air she used to carry like a perfume had vanished. She didn't ask what the paper said. She knew. She could read it on his face, in the way his shoulders dropped slightly, not from defeat, but from finally realizing something had slipped through his fingers while he was busy chasing ease. She didn't try to smooth things over. She didn't reach for his arm. She stood like someone who'd finally been left out of the loop for the right reason. He glanced back down at the paper, as if rereading it would change the terms. But it wouldn't. And when he looked up again, I didn't blink. I didn't explain. I didn't soften. I just held my cup with both hands, warmth soaking into my fingers, and said nothing. Not because I had nothing left to say, but because everything that mattered was already written, already signed, already done. There was no need to shout, no need to defend. I had already spoken, and the echo of that truth filled the room without my help. He folded the paper, slow and stiff, and set it on the table like he couldn't bear to hold it anymore. I watched him do it, still calm, still steady, still breathing the air of someone who had finally put herself back at the center of her own life. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a mother. I didn't feel like a patient. I felt like a woman who had remembered her worth before someone else could decide it for her. That look on his face, that quiet storm building behind his eyes, it wasn't just about the money or the name or the paper. It was about the shift, the boundary, the final, gentle no that echoed louder than any scream ever could. And for the first time in years, I felt seen, not needed, not tolerated. Seen. I didn't yell. I didn't ask why. Some betrayals don't deserve a conversation. They don't earn the dignity of explanation. I let the silence speak for me, because peace doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it walks in slowly, sits down beside you, and stays. These days, I drink my tea while it's still hot. I sit by the window in the mornings and listen to the birds, not the clock. I read the paper front to back if I want, or not at all. The house is quiet, but it's not empty. It's mine again. They thought I'd be waiting, sitting in the same chair, holding the same hope. But I wasn't waiting. I was rebuilding. If you've ever been erased by the people you raised, if you've ever felt like your love was something to be stored away until it's convenient again, tell me below. Or just write, I stayed. That's enough. And if you're watching this alone, if your voice has ever felt too quiet to be heard, subscribe. I'm still here, and this story, it was always meant for you. Thank you for watching.